Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we are heading deep into rural Jharkhand to unpack a really intense story from the Maroon Files. Honestly, this is a terrifying case study in how deeply rooted local rituals can suddenly spiral into these chilling, multi-layered mysteries.
I want you to consider this trajectory for a second. What started with a midnight sacrifice ended in a horrifying tale of forbidden love. I want you to keep this in the back of your mind as we trace how a cultural tradition morphed into a complete psychological thriller. We're talking stakes that are literally life and death. So let's retrace the exact steps of how this all went down.
Okay, let's dive into this. To set the scene, the date is December 26th, and the village of Mangalapara is celebrating the Push Kali Mela. Basically, it's an annual festival dedicated to goddess Kali, and the central ritual here is a mandatory midnight goat sacrifice. Our main subjects for this story are an 18-year-old local guy named Nirmal, his cousin Krishna, and his nephew Pawan. Now, their family has really close ties with the temple priest, so they are the ones tasked with locking up the temple gates after everything is done. By the time they finish up, it's 1 a.m. The entire village is dead asleep, and these three young men are standing there completely alone in the pitch black, packing the remains of their sacrificed goat into a sack to take home. Now they face a fateful choice. To get back to Nirmal's grandmother's house at the very edge of the village, they've got two options. They can take the bamboo forest road, which is 2 kilometers long but passes by scattered village houses. Or they can take the mine road. It's only 1 kilometer, but it is utterly desolate, incredibly dark, bordered by rocky hills, and completely uninhabited. You know how it is when you're just totally exhausted at 1 a.m., right? They end up choosing the shorter, much creepier mine road. Partway down this pitch-black path, Nirmal gets thirsty. They spot an isolated hand pump and make a super brief stop, leaving the sack with the goat unattended for just a few moments in the dark. Well, when they return to the sack, which was maybe just 40 or 50 meters away, something is totally off. The goat is actually protruding from the back. Nirmal looks closer and notices this horrifying detail. A single leg is missing, and it hasn't been cleanly cut with a knife or anything. It looks as if it had been violently ripped right off the goat's body. As you can imagine, the boys are absolutely terrified, but they try not to panic. They hurry home, hide the sack near the courtyard well, and go straight to bed. Let's move to the timeline and see how this builds, because from this moment, the escalation over the next 3 days is incredibly rapid. We kick things off with night 1, which features some truly grotesque behavior from a family member. By day 2, weird digital clues start popping up. Night 2 brings actual physical violence into the mix, which finally forces the family to take extreme measures by day 3. Okay, zooming in on night 1. At 3:30 in the morning, Nirmal wakes up to use the washroom. As he's crossing the courtyard, he sees his sister, Anchal, carrying the goat carcass. He follows her and watches in absolute shock as she sits down on the doorstep of a neighboring Muslim family's house, tearing the raw meat apart and literally eating it. Horrified, Nirmal runs to wake up his grandmother, but when they go back out to check, Anchal is fast asleep in her bed, and the goat completely untouched by the whale. But here is the craziest detail. Nirmal can clearly see fresh blood on Anchal's hands. His grandmother looks right at the exact same hands and sees absolutely nothing. After his grandmother goes back to bed, Nirmal just sits by Anchal's side trying to process what on earth he just saw. Suddenly, Anchal sits straight up in bed. Her hair is all disheveled. She looks right at him with this deeply unsettling, gentle smile and says, "Why are you telling everyone? You're only bothering me. Don't do that." She mumbles a few more things, and as Nirmal leans in to hear her, she realizes with absolute dread that the voice coming out of his sister's mouth is entirely not her own. The very next evening, Nirmal basically becomes an involuntary investigator. The family is sitting around a fire when Anchal starts acting really erratically about getting her phone charged. When Nirmal finally plugs it in for her, the screen lights up, revealing this massive clue. Anchal's lock screen wallpaper is a photograph of his 16-year-old neighbor girl named Farida. Now, Farida lived in the exact house Anchal was staring at the night before. And the most horrifying part? Farida had passed away just 5 or 6 days prior. But if you thought Anchal was the only one affected, think again. Later that same night, Nirmal wakes up just before midnight to find his nephew Pawan aggressively arguing with Anchal out in the courtyard. When Nirmal tries to intervene, Pawan's whole demeanor shifts. In this completely unrecognizable, furious voice, Pawan tells him to back off. Later on in their bedroom, Pawan is standing at the window just staring intently at Frida's house. When Nirmal touches his shoulder, Pawan turns around with these unnaturally red eyes, violently chokes Nirmal and snarls, "Stay away from me. Don't interfere too much, or I'll kill you." Obviously, following a violent threat like that, the family is on high alert. The very next day, they try a covert little test. They attempt to bring Anchal and Pawan over to the Kali Mata temple, but both of them rigidly refuse to even step foot inside the temple grounds. Nirmal quietly pulls the priest aside, who observes the siblings from afar. The priest gives a swift and terrifying diagnosis. He says they are under the influence of the shadow, which is the local term for demonic possession or an evil spirit. He orders Nirmal to go gather supplies for a major ritual for the following evening.
But before they can even get to that ritual, the cycle repeats itself and spirals completely out of control. That evening, after watching a local football match, Nirmal and Krishna are walking home via that exact same desolate mine road. Right near the water pump, where that goat leg went missing just days before, they find Pawan. He's sitting in the dark, actively chewing on a raw goat leg. When he turns around, his eyes are pure white, like the irises are just completely gone, and his face is smeared with blood. He chases them, picks up a stone, and violently splits Nirmal's head open before bolting back to the house.
At this point, the family realizes they are completely out of time, so they devise what we can call the car trap. Nirmal borrows a friend's car, and they trick Anchal and Pawan by promising to take them to a nice restaurant to, refresh their mood. But instead, they take the longer bamboo forest road straight to the temple. As they approach the holy ground, the entities inside the siblings realize exactly what's happening. Pawan tries to choke Nirmal from the backseat, screaming for him to stop the car, but Krishna manages to steer them right up to the gates, where the priest and his disciples literally have to physically drag the violently resisting siblings inside.
Once they get inside that temple, the atmosphere just erupts into absolute chaos. As soon as the priest starts chanting his mantras, Anchal drops to the floor, her body contorting wildly as she scrambles around the courtyard. Meanwhile, Pawan is forced into a ritual circle drawn by the priest where he stands completely frozen, just totally motionless. The priest doesn't back down. He intensifies his chanting, directly demanding the entities to reveal themselves.
And this brilliantly illustrates the moment the entire mystery cracks wide open. Anchal stops contorting, looks right at the priest, and speaks. She says, "I am Farida, the 16-year-old neighbor girl." She tells them, "One of my bracelets was dropped near the house. Anchal picked it up and wore it. I've come back to get it." But the priest, he knows this isn't the whole truth. He pushes her harder, demanding to know why she is tormenting Nirmal's family if literally all she wanted was a missing bracelet.
Under the immense pressure of the mantras, Frida's spirit finally breaks down and reveals a deeply tragic human backstory. It turns out she had harbored this secret, one-sided love for Nirmal. Because they were from different religions, she felt she could never actually tell him. At the same time, her own cousin was aggressively pressuring her to marry him instead. When Frida refused and threatened to expose him to her father, her cousin intercepted her on her way home from an aunt's house. He dragged her to an isolated road and strangled her to death. The village had been told she died of a sudden illness, but the heartbreaking reality was cold-blooded murder.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it maps out the incredible twist the priest discovers. We aren't just dealing with a single haunting here. We are dealing with two interconnected possessions. Farida's spirit possessed Anchal, using that dropped bracelet as a way to stay close to the boy she loved, Nirmal. But when Farida's murderous cousin, who had actually also died, realized Farida's spirit was lingering in that household, his spirit latched onto Nirmal's nephew, Pawan.
So the crucial point is this, and it is honestly mind-blowing. The cousin possessed Pawan for absolutely no other reason than to maintain his toxic, suffocating control over Frida, even in the afterlife. The profound tragedy of their human lives, the dark obsession, the ultimate violence, the total lack of autonomy, it replicated itself perfectly in the supernatural realm. The cousin spirit was literally policing Frida's spirit from inside Pawan's body.
Armed with the whole truth, the priest is finally able to resolve this terrifying ordeal. He uses highly specific ancient mantras to bind the volatile spirits of both Farida and her cousin. Then, he consecrates water in a traditional bronze pot and forces both Anchal and Pawan to drink it. Almost instantly, the violent behaviors cease. The siblings are safely escorted back home by the priest and his disciples, and from that night onward, the family is never bothered by the spirits again.
So, we've watched a missing goat leg on a dark road evolve into this incredibly heart-wrenching tale of unrequited love and brutal control. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? When we hear local legends of shadows and demons, how often are we actually just looking at the unresolved echoes of human trauma? Where exactly does human tragedy end and folklore begin? Keep that in mind the next time you hear a ghost story. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the stories around you. Catch you next time.